Time for us to talk about the genius that is Sam Kerr and start to make the entire nation slightly worried about the fact that we're going to face her in the World Cup. Scoring for Chelsea at the weekend as they won the Women's FA Cup before a massive crowd at Wembley Stadium. I'm delighted to say Emma Sanders, broadcast journalist with BBC Sport, is with us this morning to reflect on this. Emma, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good, thanks. Hope you're well.
It's not breaking news, but Sam Kerr is devastating when she needs to be.
Absolutely. I think, we've heard Emma Hayes, her manager, say that she's the best striker in the world. And I think you would find it hard to argue someone against that, because she just delivers in the big moments every single time. That was her sixth goal that was her goal in 6 consecutive cup finals for Chelsea, which I think is just an unbelievable stat. And yeah, she just needed one chance and she took it.
It's the hallmark of a great striker, Emma, isn't it? Because you can be not involved and disassociated from a game and missing chances and just not getting the ball, and then all of a sudden the chance comes and she takes it.
Yeah, because I think Manchester United were the better team in the first half. They created more chances. Sam Kerr wasn't really in the game. At half-time, you were wondering how Chelsea were going to get the ball to her. She makes those runs in behind, and that's where she is so dangerous. And Manchester United weren't allowing Chelsea to do that. They were really stubborn at the back. And then, Emma Hayes made a substitution, brought on Pernille Harder, brought on Sophie Ingle in the middle. Changed the system slightly, and it just seemed to completely unlock that Manchester United defence. And then suddenly Sam Kerr was being able to make these runs in behind, and that was it. And you just felt at some point she was going to have a moment. And when it came, there was absolutely no mistaking. And the backflip came out, trademark backflip celebration, which I think everyone at Wembley was hoping to see. Certainly the Blues fans were hoping to see anyway.
She had texted her mate before the match, hadn't she, saying watch out for the backflip today. So she knew she was going to score, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. She just knew that on the big occasions she always has those moments, and I think that was something that everybody sort of going into the final was looking out for. It was how long really can Manchester United keep her at bay, and yeah, obviously they did well for 70 odd minutes. But yeah, as soon as that moment came, I wrote this in my match report, but you could already hear sort of the Chelsea fans. They were on their feet. They were half cheering before she'd even touched the ball, because there was just no chance that she was going to miss it from there. And yeah, I almost missed the backflip. Had my head down, writing the information, and almost missed it. But yeah, she knew it was coming. I think most people in Wembley knew it was coming as well.
Emma Hayes' comments afterwards were very interesting, Emma, because she kind of compared the styles of the two teams. She said this was a victory for grind, and talked about how flexible her Chelsea team has become. Our team has become hybrid monsters, I think was the phrase. Like, what does she mean by that?
Yeah, well, I think this season we've seen perhaps a different side to Chelsea than what we've seen before. Chelsea have obviously dominated English women's football. They've struggled in Europe until recent years, where they've started to get into the latter stages. And I think by their progression in Europe, they've had to adapt their style slightly. So whereas, certainly in the WSL, they're used to dominating the ball and controlling teams. And then they've tried to adapt in Europe, where they're now a comfortable team out of possession as well. So like having someone like Sam Kerr, they are playing a lot more direct, where they might only have 2-3 chances in a game, and they've just become really ruthless. So they've now sort of taken that over across the whole season this year because of injuries to senior players. Sam Kerr has often been the only attacking player that they've got fit. They've had some other big injuries at centre-back. So, yeah, they have had to sort of fight through games and grind out wins. It's not always been pretty, but I think that was what Emma Hayes was addressing after the final, was that actually her side have now found a way to adapt to certain situations, certain formations, and when players are missing, they have other players who can come in, rotate, play slightly different roles, but they're all very clear on what they need to do. That perhaps wasn't something that we saw 2-3 years ago from this Chelsea side. So it's a progression. And as I say, Manchester United were arguably the better team across the 90 minutes, but certainly as the game went on, you felt Chelsea were coming into their own. And it certainly wasn't a massive surprise, the timing of the goal, because they had just started to cause some more problems. So, yeah, it was, I think Emma Hayes said it was the most memorable FA Cup final win that she's had with Chelsea.
Emma, speaking of progression, there was a record crowd for a domestic football match. We'd seen just the previous week, maybe 10 days ago, the crowd for the Arsenal-Wolfsburg game. And there's been regularly across the course of the season record crowds surging towards the game. And coming off the aftermath of the tournament, that was so successfully hosted by England, it does feel as if there's been a proper learning about how to build on something. Like the word legacy around sports tournaments is always, like you look back in London and what is London's tarnished legacy now for hosting the Olympic Games. But for some reason, this time there does seem to be a very clear correlation between what happened and what's happening now. Why do you think that is? First off, is that correct? Is it a legacy, or has it been building anyway and the tournament was kind of incidental, or what's your assessment of that? And if it is true, why is that happening?
Yeah, I do think it is true. I think the game was building anyway, but at nowhere near the acceleration or the level that it has post-Euros. So, I do agree. I do think it has had a massive impact. And I think there's several reasons for why they've managed to be successful. And I think one of them has to go to the FA, because they had obviously planned the tournament with the future in mind, and they had been in communication and correspondence with all the clubs, certainly in the Women's Super League, but also with UEFA and other governing bodies around the world on how they can make sure that the Euros had a lasting impact. So, it's not often that you give praise to the Football Association, but I think certainly they deserve one on this time. And likewise, the clubs themselves, I think, they were well aware that they needed to capitalise in terms of marketing. They needed to invest, and it wasn't down to just one or two clubs. It needed to be a collective effort across the league. So if they wanted better broadcast deals, then they needed to show the media, show the TV that they were going to be investing in quality players. They were going to be recruiting the best players in the world. So I think clubs certainly as well. They improved their marketing, and they improved their recruitment, their investment. And the players as well, because I think the players have taken a lot of things on their shoulders in terms of outside of football. And certainly you look at the England squad, and England captain Nia Williamson's a great example. She really strived in that role of responsibility. And, it wasn't just about going on the pitch and playing football. To her, it meant a lot more. And I think she wasn't afraid to show that. And she spent a lot of time in the media, going around to grassroots football. Obviously, they spent time working with the government to try and get football in schools. So, yeah, I think it was a collective effort, really, and several reasons why. But certainly, the success of England helped big time. But, yeah, I think certainly the way that they capitalised on that is something that should be celebrated.
Do you know, are there specific examples, and not to put you on the spot here, but what the FA actually did? What was part of their plan to make sure that they were able to unleash what has happened?
Well, I think just in general, it was about, one of their main goals was getting more people into stadiums. So, when you mentioned there the attendances, that was something that they'd set out before the tournament had started. It was one of their main goals that they wanted to achieve post-Euros. So simple things like they had members of the FA going into clubs and sort of running workshops on how they can improve their marketing and their ticket sales. They were in correlation with clubs around when they can host games at men's stadiums. So, for example, I know they worked with Arsenal in terms of trying to build their regularity at the Emirates Stadium, and Arsenal have been a brilliant example to everyone, certainly in the WSL. They played 3 WSL games there this season. They played every knockout round in the Champions League, and obviously they reached the semi-finals this year. And we've seen them host, huge crowds. Obviously, they now have the WSL record as well, which was made this season. So, Arsenal was a great example of a club that wanted to grow that sustainably, and the FA have sort of guided them through that. And they've now recently announced that from next season they'll be having 5 WSL games there next season, so that's up from 3. And again, if they can qualify for the Champions League, then all of the knockout stages will be played there. So, that would be one example, really. It was just about sort of those workshops and getting certain personnel in specific areas of expertise, really, to help guide clubs through that, sustainable process, really.
Yeah, because in like the history of world sport, it's a really brilliant example of what happens when you get all the stakeholders invested behind a plan and everybody kind of fully understands what the plan is, and then ultimately the upside, we don't know what the upside is, but we're starting to see it.
Yeah, and I think that's the really exciting thing, is that it's not just one person driving this or one organisation driving this. As you say, it's everyone involved. It's the media, it's the fans, it's the players, it's the football associations, it's the clubs. And it's all a collective, and I think that's why it has been so successful, because it isn't just down to one factor, it's down to several things and several people working together. And that needs to carry on. That can't stop. I think that's something as well that obviously the FA are keen on doing. They're about to sort of hand over the WSL to a new company, which we were told yesterday would be August 2024, that they're eyeing that up. So that's going to be the next stage. And at the moment, it's about members of the PFA, members of clubs, the FA board, in conversation with a sort of CEO working group on how they can take that next step and ensure that the legacy of the Euros isn't just a 1 year thing or a 2 year thing, that it actually becomes a 10 to 20 year thing, and it continues.
I know you have the finger on the pulse when it comes to the transfer market. We do a lot of talking about Megan Campbell on this show, not just about her long throw-ins, but we're curious to see where her future lies, whether it's at Liverpool or beyond. Do you have any insight as to where Megan Campbell might be playing her football next season?
Yeah, well, as far as my understanding, it won't be at Liverpool unless anything dramatically changes overnight. She was in conversations with Liverpool for several months. I think she was quite keen to extend her contract there, and my understanding is last week those talks broke down. So I'm expecting her to leave the club this summer. Where to? We're not too sure yet. I know Brighton had showed interest earlier in the season, but they've sort of directed their attention to targets now. Short of interest, certainly she proved she was very, very effective in the Women's Championship last season. Maybe her age might put her off a couple of WSL clubs, but I think certainly there'll be suitors there. I think she'll. It'll, as I say, I don't think it will be at Liverpool, but I think if she was to stay in the WSL, I don't think that would come as a surprise to anyone.
Emma, we'll leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thank you.